Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to our next session of reading Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. We're continuing Book 7 of the Ethics, looking at today Chapter 5. This is the next perplexity of the question of accuracy or lack of self restraint. Um, Today we're dealing with the question of what is pleasant by nature, right? So now, some things are pleasant by nature. And of these, some are pleasant without qualifications, others are such according to the various kinds of animals and human beings involved. Others are such according to question that it depends on the type of animal or human involved. So some things are by nature pleasant, and of these there are some things that are pleasant without qualifications, but others that are there's qualifications, but depends on the kind of various kinds of animals or human beings involved. Certain things, by contrast, are not pleasant by nature, but do become pleasant on account of some people's defects. Okay, so there are some things that are not by nature, but they become pleasant by people's defects. Others through habits. So people have defects. These are things that are not pleasant, right, by nature. They're not. In other words, they're not necessarily unpleasant by nature, but it's not pleasant by nature. In other words, they're not pleasant by nature. Now, what is meant by here? Are they pleasant? Are they still pleasant? No, but they become through defect. They're not pleasant by nature, but they come through either people's defects, others through habits, and still others on account of people's corrupt natures. So therefore, there's three ways that these certain things, by contrast to these things pleasant by, that some things pleasant by nature, either they're unqualifiedly so or unqualifiedly so, and depending on the animals. And then there's things that are not pleasant by nature, but what happens? They do become pleasant to some people on account of either their defects, the defect of some defect they have, of bodily defect in that sense, or some kind of something wrong with them, or through habits, or on the account of the corrupt natures. Their natures are so corrupted that they choose the wrong thing purposely in that sense, right? Since this is so, it is possible to see in each of these cases characteristics closely resembling them. Okay, so therefore, given that these things and also this last thing, there's going to be character. Each one of these states are going to have a characteristic. Since this is so, like this, I mean the British characteristic, for example, the human female who, they say, rips open pregnant women and devours the infant, or the sort of thing that people assert certain savages living along the Black Sea enjoy, some of whom enjoy raw meat, others human flesh, and still others trade their children with one another to feast on them. Or what is said about Phalaris. Now, this is 127. Okay, 26, the Black Sea, more literally around Pontus, a region of Asia Minor in the south shore of the Black Sea, famously for the brutality or barbarism of some of the tribes. This is C Politics 1338, B 19 and 24, which I think this is about book 8. I can remember book 7, maybe, I think. I don't remember correctly. This is barbarism in that sense. And then Fairless, a tyrant of Acrasia, Ragas, Acagras. So the Pharaoh's tyrant of this Acrasia, he says, notorious for his inventive cruelty, he was known to have roasted his victims alive in a hollow brazen bull, for example. So therefore, this two things, this Fairless was a vicious person. This viciousity. In other words, there's something about the British character means is that they're vicious in a sense. Either they're cannibals, the brutality of this, or this monstrous tyrant whose inventive cruelty. These are brutish characteristics. And other such characteristics arise through illness as well as through madness in some cases, like the man who made a sacrifice of his mother and ate her, and the person who ate the liver of his fellow slave. And still others are marked by disease or arise from habit. For example, plucking out one's hairs or gnawing at one's fingernails, or even on coal and dirt. In addition to these, the pleasures of sex with males. Okay, so, in other words, habit, either through what he says, either they're still marked. So, therefore, there is this madness, there's this madness, these examples, and then others arise marked by disease or arise from habit, some kind of disease or compulsion that they gnaw on their hair and gnaw on their fingernails and even eat coal or dirt, right? In addition to these, there's the next one. For some of these arise by nature, others by habit. For example, those who are wantonly abused from childhood. So therefore, some of these things that happen here in this last case happen by disease, happen by nature, or they happen because of habit. Habit are things are either through disease or because they were abused from childhood, or literally treated with hubris, treated and who are wantonly treated with hubris, be abused in that sense. Literally 28 here is literally treated with hubris, wantonly treated with hubris, from childhood. So there was humiliated constantly, humiliated and destroyed. So therefore, this is that these other things, and these people who gnaw their hair and know that things, clip their fingernails. Yeah, the bad habits I have. Is it through habit or through nature? I don't know. And the question is, it habit or nature wanting to be used by children? In other words, some of these arise by nature, others by habits. And the habits is usually, for example, those who are wanting abuse from childhood, right? This is an example of this, okay? And then the question is, the pleasure of sex with males is dropped in there. Homosexuality is brought in here, right? Which is, Aristotle would say, those wanting to have sex with male. Is it habit? Is it by nature? Is it something that arises by nature, or is it something by habit? Okay, that's an interesting thing, and that's even suggested by both, right? Interesting. The last thing may also be suggesting that even this can arise by either by nature or by habit, right? As for those people whose condition is caused by nature, no one would say that they lack self-restraint, just as one would not say say it of women because they are passive rather than active in marital relations. In other words, the example of this is that in marital relations or sex activities, they're more passive. Women are more passive than they are. In other words, is this habit? Again, you wouldn't blame them for that because that's what habit has taught them. You could say, right? But the one who is by nature has lacked self-constraint. Okay. Nor similarly would one say it of all those who are in a disease condition through a given habit. In other words, the person who is had that given habit is in a disease condition. They don't lack self-restraint in that sense. Of those conditions, each of these conditions falls out the defining boundaries of vice, as does brutishness as well. So there was these conditions, including brutishness, fall out of vice in that sense. As for someone who has such a condition, overpowering it or being overpowered Literally, here Aristotle takes the passive verb of kratin. Here Aristotle uses here the active and passive form of kratin, the verb related to self-restraint or and lack of self enkratia. So kratin, which is the verb here, and therefore what is it? Overpowered. Over. In other words, the conditions of overpowering it and being over. In other words, overcoming it, overpowering it, and this is enkratia, and this is akrasia, right? Or being overpowered by it is not a matter of simple lack of self-restraint, but this only by way of a certain similarity to it. So therefore, there is not, in other words, this brutishness, this vice, and this being over. In other words, each of those conditions fall outside of the vice. Because why? Because someone who has this condition, overpowering it or being overpowered by it is not simply a matter of self-restraint. But this is only, but this only by way of a certain something similarity to it, right? For just as someone who, when it comes to spiritedness, undergoes this passion may be said to lack self-restraint by way of a certain similarity, yet he ought not to be said to lack self-restraint simply, right? This idea that this person who doesn't, who comes to the question of spiritedness, um, he undergoes a passion, right, of this. He lacks self-restraint, but he doesn't lack self-restraint. This goes back to the other point, that is the case, that someone who lacks self-restraint because of this situation doesn't lack it in a specific sense. He ought not to said to lack self-restraint simply. In even instances of excessive foolishness, cowardice, licentiousness, and harshness, some people are marked by brutishness, others by disease. Okay, so therefore, even these cases of foolishness, cowardice, licentiousness, and harshness, some are marked because of brutishness, something about their character, their nature. Their nature is defective. Other is simply by disease. Something is defective in that. For someone who is by nature such as to be afraid of everything, even if a mouse makes a noise, is a coward whose cowardice is brutish. Whereas the fellow who was afraid of the weasel was a coward through disease. Okay, so there's the one who is one person is this, he's cowardly because his nature makes him afraid of everything. Someone who's afraid of such is afraid of everything, even if a mouse does it, right? But the person who the cowardice, or someone's coward of this particular thing, the weasel. Okay, cowardice, whose cowardice is brutish. Whereas that fellow who's afraid of weasel, I'm afraid of weasel. This is a disease. Something was wrong. It's a phobia. We call it phobia, right? There's a phobia. A phobia is a specific over a kind of irrational action response of fear towards something. So this guy has a phobia of weasel. So he acts cowardly because of the weasel. This person is simply just afraid, constantly afraid, constantly afraid. So when the mouse comes, okay. As of the foolish, someone who are irrational as the result of nature and live by sense perception alone. So, in other words, like certain tribes of distant barbarians, are brutish. In other words, I am irrational by nature, and live by only perception, like certain tribes do. These are brutish. But others who are such through a disease, for example, epileptics or madness, are diseased. So therefore, something's wrong. In other words, it's something making them that. That it's not. Their nature isn't like that. There's an error in their nature, but this is like that by their nature. Okay, there are some people, whose natures are like this. Others, their nature generally isn't like that, but something makes them like that. Okay, So that's a distinction here. Now, this is the big problem: is there, in other words, do, at one level, this assumes that this type of person, the barbarian and the one who doesn't have the barbarian, have are different, not different creatures, but their natures are different. Okay, their physis or their makeup there is different. And then the one who is diseased has a different nature than that, but the disease makes them brutish. Okay, this is the conception. Now this will cause lots of problems. This, oh my God, this is racial differences. Oh my God, there are, this is where Aristotle is kind of a ethno. In other words, different peoples and different things will have different natures. Their natures, not no, they're still human beings, but even among human beings, although they share the class of human beings, there will be differences in their natures as different groups and peoples. So therefore, what is natural is also variable in this sense, not absolute. It varies between class or subgroup. And then even within that subgroup, it's still that they share a common nature, but it differentiates. But regarding the individual group what is part of that, still, both as human being and as that class, there are some things that are going to happen not because of, now, what differentiates class? Okay, see, he hasn't addressed that issue. He ignores that issue. He doesn't ask. Aristotle doesn't ask us here, how does these differentiation occurs? Now he argues that it would become environment adapt. I think in many ways he and Montesquieu would agree on this point, that it's adaptation to environments and how this. In other words, the common nature will adapt differently in different environments, and those that survive pass on their traits and habits and those things. In other words, this is the connection between all the way back in book 2, the connection between habits and nature, right? With natural habits and then things we choose. So there's nomoi, right? The habits are like a second nature in this fundamental sense. That in fact, habits, the question is, when does a habit ultimately start impacting the physiology, the biology of the thing? That is a question that is not addressed here, but it's hinted at here to some degrees, right? Now, it is possible sometimes, and it's sometimes possible for someone just to have one of these characteristics but not be overpowered by it, right? I mean, for example, if Phalaris had kept in check his desire to eat a child or to enjoy a strange sexual pleasure. In other words, the example is of Phalaris as the tyrant, right? All of a sudden, I may be bad, right? I may be, in other words, um, it is sometimes possible for someone just to have one of these characteristics, but not be overpowered by it. In other words, that I have the desire to eat child or to enjoy sexual pleasure, but I don't do it. Oh, the alcoholic. This is the example. This would be the someone who has the trait of alcoholism in their genetic heritage, family heritage, that they have the capacity for this. But since they don't drink, and therefore they don't become alcoholic. Okay, that's the same thing here. You have it, but you don't engage in it, right? But it is also possible to be overpowered by it, not merely to have it. So that's the other thing. So therefore, there's one type that they have this desire, but they're not overpowered by it. But then there is also possible to be overpowered by it, not necessarily to have it. That they can't help it. That they can't. Just as in the case of corruption too. Then there is the corrupted spoken of in its unqualified sense, in reference to a human being, and then there is the corruption spoken in reference to some additional qualification, that it is a corruption stemming from brutishness or disease, but not corruption without qualification. So, in the same manner, there is clearly also the lack of self restraint that is brutish, and a lack of self restraint that stems from disease. So, therefore, in other words, there is going to be corruption. There's going to be corruption that is simply due to in a complete sense. But then there is a corruption that is due to out of some a corruption of a specific qualification, that the corruption stemming from his brutishness or disease, right? In other words, the question of, and not corruption unqualified. There's a corruption in the sense that there's, you have the character is ultimately corrupt. So the question is the corruption in self-restraint or its the lack of self-restraint. In other words, having the good character and then the corruption, that's the opposite. Having the quality, the good quality, and then having the corrupted quality. And then and that in corruption there is this what? There's those who have it in the general sense by nature, and those who have it in some specific sense through habit or through disease, right? And therefore, the same question happens here, that this lack of same thing with self-restraint. It happens. Is it by brutishness? Is it by nature in the full sense, or is it through this kind of through disease or accidental habit because some kind of habit that you've had, a bad habit or some kind of habit that's forced you to be this way, right? Something that's forced you to be this way. It's not of your nature, but something has compelled you to be this way. Okay, but not only, but only that which relates to human licentiousness is lack of self-restraint and unqualified. So therefore, only human licentiousness is lack of self-restraint in an unqualified sense. So therefore, in other words, that human licentiousness is lack of self-restraint in an unqualified. Animals, no. Animals, this is not going to be unqualified. Only with humans is that that their something is and it's unqualifiedly that. Why? Because they simply can't control it. It is clear, then, that lack of self-restraint and self-restraint are concerned only with the matters to which licentiousness and sophosune, moderation, or translated moderation, sophosune, or sound-mindedness, pertains. And that the lack of self-restraint pertaining to other things is another form of it. So these things are mostly tied to the matters of which licentiousness and moderation, the bodily pleasures and pains, right, and the things of the body, and that the lack of self-restraint pointing to other things is another form, which is spoken of as lack of self-restraint only metaphorically and not unqualifiedly. In other words, these are always going to be they're not, in a sense, always lack of self-restraint. It's metaphorically self-restraint in this sense that it is like it, similar to it. So let's stop here. If you have any comments or questions, please put it below. If you want issues or something you want further explanations of, I will respond to it, and when I see it, and I respond to it. Maybe I might even have to make an accidental video to do something about this. The other thing is, if you've liked it, if you like what we did here today, like the video, hit the like button, please. Thumbs up it. It helps the algorithm. If you liked it, also share it far and wide. Share it in your social media. Share it with your friends. Share the links to people. And again, sharing this also helps improve the algorithm of the channel. If you've not subscribed, please subscribe. I'd like to grow the channel some, get more attention, grow with that. As we grow bigger. We're not right now. I'm still a small channel. If we go bigger, we get more rights and privileges and certain things. So I hope to grow some more. If we're not, if you didn't like it, you can always thumbs down. But say why in the comments. This way we can learn. Not as me, maybe even me, but also the audience will learn. This is why we're doing this. Another thing we need to do here is if you want to follow me on social media, the social media links are below. If you want to find more about me, about as a scholar and as a researcher, and see my research and scholarship, you can go below, look at the academic social media links below, the social media links. And if you want to help me to do what I do, it's financially a little bit to give some money and that things, you can do so through the links to Patreon or Subscribe Star below. Or you can buy one. Another way you can help is to buy one of my books, the three books that are currently available. Um, you can order it through you can order it through, if your bookstore has a copy, you can buy it there, but you can order it through your bookstore, or you can order it online through the common booksellers like Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or you can order it through the publisher. Now, some publishers are harder to get, others. Washington University might be hard to get, but the LSU maybe not, and Lulu would not. But I particularly recommend those of you who wish to use my who are studying the Aristotle's Politics, who would like a guide through this, to go buy my notebook for Aristotle's Politics through Lulu, because by that, buying it through Lulu gives me the profit that the bookstores get. So that the money that the bookstores would get in that sense. So it's nice. It'll be useful for me. Okay, that's it. Next time we see each other, we'll be looking at chapter 6 of the Ethics. So take care. Bye bye. Have a good day.